Hey, welcome to episode 51 of Tangible Takeaways. We're excited that you are watching this week as we wrap up the series of Esther. My name is Jody. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how the providence of God is often seen kind of in the rear view as we look back over our life and how that helps us as we move forward.
Yeah. And I'm Landon, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how a song about King Xerxes would make a good country song.
It would, though.
It would.
So here we go. Great episode today. Two bald guys, like looking in the mirror, my friend.
That's
like
right.
Looking in the mirror. So we'll jump in here and have a great time today as we wrap up the series on Esther.
Let's go.
Roll it. Well, hey, Landon, welcome to Tangible Takeaways.
Thanks for having me.
You're back.
Glad to be back.
You were here a while ago.
It's been a while.
I was not here then.
31 episodes, we just found out.
Yeah, you were here 20. So this is a plug for episode 20. If you haven't seen it,
So
go
it took
back and
20
watch.
episodes to get to me, and then they waited 31 to get to me again. So apparently,
It was really impressive.
I need to step it up a little bit, you know?
I'm only here because Jackson's not, apparently. So here we are together. But I am excited for us today. I think this will be a good episode for folks, hopefully really practical. I mean, they all are to some degree, but we're coming off the tail end of wrapping up the study in Esther. Did you enjoy the study, like personally? I mean, and I know that's a weird question. What were you going to say? No, it was horrible. But I mean, like,
Do you want me to
did
be
you,
honest?
Yeah. Did you legitimately? Because I mean, some series really hit differently than others, and I'm just curious.
I would say, honestly, I've been in the church my whole life, 31 years old. This is the first time I think I've ever been in a series on the Book of Esther.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Traditionally, I guess it's usually one of those women's conference things, or it's always the ladies are studying Esther, and I don't know why we don't more often. But yeah, it was an interesting 8 weeks. A lot of reflection on things that we don't normally talk about. So
Yeah. What were some things then in that sense that kind of caught you by surprise, or that you were like, oh wow, I didn't think that was there. I didn't realize. Were there any of those kind of aha moments throughout?
yeah, I mean, definitely the whole idea of God's providence. Just not that Esther necessarily did this, but it just kind of opened up your eyes to like look at your own life and realize how God has been at work in your life and actually recognize him for it. Because I think that's kind of the theme is God was clearly at work on behalf of Israel, and they weren't really looking for that. And so noticing that in my own life, sometimes you ask the question, why am I here? What am I doing? How have I arrived at this point? What is my life? And you're like, God's been at work in this thing the whole time for specific purposes. And as those things come out, just actually recognizing that his hand is in it.
Yeah.
And so that was a challenging thing.
I think I get asked a lot, working with students especially, that when you start getting towards the end of high school for a teenager looking ahead, or even as young adults or college students, like, what's God's will for my life, right? And what am I supposed to do? And what does God want me to do? And how do I pick the right school? Or how do I know? I mean, all those things. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I often will tell people when I look back at my life and all of the major decisions, I'll even say, that I made, man, I can really only say that maybe in the moment, 3 or 4 of those I knew in that moment for certain, like, this is what God's doing. But I can sit on this side of those moments and look back, even in some of the most painful moments, and articulate so much clearer now, like, man, God was there. This is how God used those. This is what God was doing. And I think it's easy to forget that every time you find yourself in one of those moments, that you're like, what is happening right now? And I think to stop and go, oh, you know what? God did that then.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing something now.
Something I've found interesting recently, just in speaking to younger folks, and they're wrestling through those decisions of like, what does God want me to do, and where is 10 years down the road from that, I still feel that.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
and I think even my parents, talking with them the last couple years about when are they going to retire and what are they going to do. I mean, I think our lives are filled with decisions like that, but there's always a piece of God is involved in anything that we do, and we can always recognize that. We have no idea what the next few years are going to hold. Obviously, if we didn't learn anything in the last couple of years, it's like looking ahead is just like, why even do it? Live in this moment, recognize God in the middle of your life, try to honor him with the day-to-day, and let the results take care of themselves. He's in charge of that. So
that's good. And I think that's a good point. Like, you're going to have, regardless of where you are in life, you're going to find yourself in a situation where it's an unknown.
Yep.
Like what's next or what's ahead, and being able to recognize that past faithfulness to carry you through is really important, I think. And so that's a good point. I think in the book of Esther, for me, even seeing, man, this is an incredibly scary situation where it's not just an unknown of what am I going to do, but what's going to happen to me. So even less control, in the sense of like, oh no, what does that mean? And so certainly we find ourselves in circumstances that we may not have brought on our own selves, although sometimes our own decisions do, right? Consequences and things.
We do.
Yeah. But I think being able to, and even in those moments, go, you know what? God's not done, right? Somewhere in the middle here, he's good. But that doesn't mean that we just kind of take our hands off the wheel and say, okay, Jesus, take the wheel kind of thing, right? See, song reference for you as a worship guy, right?
We're doing that one next Sunday.
Is that it? That's gonna be the closing song.
Just kidding.
But I do think that we see that providence throughout, and we emphasize that pretty heavy in the series. I mean, we defined it almost every week for the first 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
In terms of what does it mean when we talk about the providence of God, and yet I think it's something that we often forget.
I'm reminded of it every week. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad was a worship leader at our church as a volunteer. He's a teacher, but none of us played guitar. Like, it wasn't a thing in our family. There was a guy that gave a guitar to our family. He's like, God instructed me to give you this guitar, and we were like, why?
Yeah.
We don't play guitar.
Cool. It'll look good in the living room.
Yeah, and so most of my life, I was content to be, a drummer. Let someone else lead, and I don't know, just through God's work over the years, like me on leading worship with a guitar is like a every week reminder of God's hand in my life, not my own. Just because, and even last week I played that guitar.
Yeah.
So it's yet again, like, in my hands is this guitar that God gave our family. So God's providence, even in that, like looking back, it's like, I didn't really want this necessarily, but that's what he wanted and that's what he made happen. And just kind of recognizing that, I don't know, it's been a really powerful reflection on that. So
that's good. I was thinking similar. In fact, I had a conversation with one of my kids. My dad was in the Air Force military. I was born in Vegas, and then my parents divorced when I was like 13 months old, so really young. And my mom and dad were both high school sweethearts, grew up in the same town. So when my parents divorced, my mom and I moved back to Tennessee, which is where I grew up, and moved in with my grandparents. And my dad's parents would come and pick me up and take me to church every week. And so I grew up going to church, but no one in my house necessarily did. No, I don't really ever remember anyone in my home going to church. And then, we kind of moved out later, and then I got in high school and kind of stopped going to church. And then my best friend was killed in a car accident, and God really used even that to get me back to church. And then my whole calling to vocational ministry came my senior year of high school out of that tragedy, really, and drawing me back into church. And then I went away to Bible college, and that's where I met my wife and kids and became a youth pastor, and still working with students now. And I often think, like, in the conversations with my kids was like, what do you think would have happened had, my parents not divorced? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I would have been in Vegas for a few years, in England for a few years, in Texas for a few years, and Oklahoma for a few years, and Arkansas for a few years, and then North Carolina for a few years. And I'm not saying that God still couldn't have done what he did, but God used what was seemingly tragedy twice in my life, what the world would look at and say that, and he used it to make me who I am today.
Even maybe something that wasn't his design, he still uses for his good.
Totally, right? Yeah. And I think as we look at the book of Esther, I think that's what we see. Yeah. And that, to me, man, is just incredibly encouraging. Not only as an individual who I feel like has experienced that in my life, but as a parent, right? Because your kids are growing up, they're a little bit behind mine. Mm-hmm. But as a parent, you look and you think the weight of responsibility, and every decision your kids make that's maybe not the one you would make, you feel responsible for, and you're launching them out into the world, and it can be a scary thing.
So the takeaway for this, for the college student, is even if you choose the wrong school, God can still.
That's right. You're going to change your major twice anyway.
That's right. No, but, it takes a lot of the weight off, knowing that it's not my job as a parent to be a perfect parent. Yeah. God can still use my imperfections. The things that I don't give them could be the thing that drives them to him, which is, there's a piece of that that's painful, but there's a piece of that that's beautiful, that God's going to use whatever to draw people to him. And it can be a hard road or not, but he'll use it for his good. So
yeah, it's good. And not to say that we don't strive to be parents who honor the Lord and
of course
live out gospel-centered homes. I think that would be our goal. But I think knowing and trusting that the providence of God, again, is at work both in us and even in the lives of those around us, kids, our neighbors, our family. So, we're not just losing hope every time the rug feels pulled out from under us. It's good. What do you think about the title of the series was Step Up, right? And obviously we see that happen a few times, for good and for bad, in the series. We see maybe Haman step up to do some pretty terrible things. The king steps up to do some terrible things. Mordecai steps up. We see him step up early just in the past, where he stepped up and took Esther in. That's a big deal. Then he kind of, helps step up, and Esther finds herself in the position she's in. And then when the moment comes of crisis, Esther steps up. And that's the one that we really focus on in the book of Esther. What is the takeaway really for that? Like, what does that look like for us if, for folks watching and who've listened to the messages? And if you haven't, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the messages. Again, great series, very practical. But what is it? What are some areas, like what advice do you give on that? Like, how do you step up? What does it even mean to step up?
I think the beauty of the series kind of being, there's a storyline here, so there's so many different, it's not like one topic, right? There was so many different topics that I remember. I remember Pastor Tom talking about California, I think it was chapter 4. I remember, at the end, we're talking about stepping up in fear, or even in our celebration, even in the good times. Like, there's so many different ways that you can step up. And I think the story of Christianity or our lives in following Jesus. We respond to the gospel. Our heart is made new, and we enter this lifelong journey
Yeah.
of renewing our mind, of growing in our obedience, growing in our affection toward Christ, and every day stepping closer to Him until the day that He removes us from this earth, gives us a glorified body, and we are forever unified with Him. But until that day, every day drawing nearer to Him, stepping more in step with Christ. And that's to me, that's the call, is to step up. Is like, for every single Christian, there is something that we need to step up in.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of things, actually. But for me, almost narrowing it down to like, what is one thing that I can step up in? Whether it's in my home, whether it's in my personal devotional time, whether it's the people around me, or even navigating a society in this this nation where the Jews are the enemies, and they're trying to, like, God obviously acts on their behalf, but like looking at our own example that we live in, the United States of America, things are kind of odd sometimes.
Yeah.
And just to step up in our faith, to trust that God is working in it, that He will work in it when we yield to Him. So I think there's a lot of ways to step up.
Yeah.
You just pick one.
What I hear you saying is be purposeful.
Yeah.
And prepared, right? That when the moment comes, be ready, and don't be afraid to step up, to lean into that moment. I think what's interesting, and we've talked to Pastor Todd, maybe even said this, and I don't know if it was in teaching team or if it was just in conversation, but like, we don't see God speak directly to Esther, but we see Mordecai speak to Esther, right? To encourage Esther. And we don't actually see God speak to Mordecai either, but certainly Mordecai is guiding Esther throughout that a bit. And he's the one that steps in and challenges her to kind of step up and fill the gap. And I think there's moments even where that, for us, is how do I step up and encourage this person? Or whether that's as a parent, whether that's as a neighbor, a friend, a coworker, a spouse. And then maybe opportunities come where, there's an opportunity to step up and share the gospel with somebody. What does it look like to take that moment? That's a scary moment that I think it's easy to back away from. Go, somebody else will. But how are we prepared?
There's always a way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, getting that phone call a few months ago, like, hey, we need some more coaches in this little league,
Yikes.
And I'm like, personally, I didn't really want to do this, but like, okay, like,
But if you're
So in one
watching
sense-
and Landon was the coach of your kid's team, he loved it.
Yeah. So in
He's-
one sense, I step up to lead this team, step
Yeah.
up to coach this team, because it's something that, I like baseball. I step up to do that. But there were parents that stepped up
Yeah.
to majorly help me, to take that weight off my shoulders, to encourage me, to thank me. Like, it doesn't always have to be this big thing. I think we make step
Oh,
up
that's
sound
good. Yeah.
like, oh man, I'm going to step up and I'm going to be like the leader, the dude, step into this major role. And it could be something like, man, just encourage somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said, like, how often are we discouraged in life, and how often do you get encouraged by somebody? Like, I heard it said, like, nobody ever quits anything by being over encouraged.
Right.
Usually
Right.
that could be just a small way where, like, man, is there somebody in your life that's making a difference that you can just write them a little note and say, listen, we appreciate you? I mean, who else is stepping into that? Step up and do that.
Yeah.
It might make a massive difference in that person's life and your own heart.
Yeah.
To be the encourager, like,
Well, I think when I look at scripture so often, and I've referenced Daniel in the past and others, you see the moment that we often highlight, like, oh, this is the moment that we, step up. And you see these guys these girls take these massive, like, moments of stepping into their faith. But they're almost always preceded by small moments maybe, and many times moments that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think of Daniel in the lion's den. That's the moment, right? But then you go to Daniel 1 and not eating the king's meat. That's a private moment. We see David fighting Goliath. But David's already known as a man of valor the chapter before that. And David says, look, I've already fought lions and bears and tigers. Oh my, right? Like I've already done all these things leading up into, and he was responsible with what was given. He stepped up, and I think, we could look at failures of all those people as well. Abraham, man, the big moment of Abraham to sacrifice his son, right? That God's call. Does that moment happen if Abraham's not faithful when he steps up, when God says, come out of this land, I'm taking you to another?
Right.
So God asked him to step up to leave. So, and then when the bigger moment came, he was ready. And a lot of times I think we don't ever see the big moments to step up because we're not really looking for the small moments as they come.
Faithful with
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Trusted with more. Yeah. I think we're always looking for this big moment to step up, and it might just be, I wake up 10 minutes earlier and spend some time with me.
Yeah.
Make a habit of that. Like,
Yeah.
That's a big way to step up for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And maybe ultimately that leads to you having more knowledge of God's word, a heart to share it with others, opportunities that you see to share it. And then all of a sudden, the big moment happens because you were faithful with the little moments.
Yeah. There's a study, it's old now, Experiencing God by a guy named Henry Blackaby. Great study. And he says, and he's talking about, man, how do I experience God in my life, right? And the big thing he says, if you want to experience God, then it's pretty easy. You look and see where God is already at work, and you join in, right? And I think sometimes we're just sitting there waiting for like God to show up and speak and say, hey, go and do. This is your moment, get out there.
Give me a sign, Lord.
Yeah, just give me a sign, Lord. Or like we make deals like, if I see a shooting star right now, I will know that I'm supposed to go talk to my neighbor tomorrow.
He's like, I gave you a
he's
Bible.
Outside, when I come outside, when it's time to go to work, even though he works the night shift and I'm leaving in the morning, but maybe he's checking the mail. And so when he jingles his key, like we just kind of put all these and the reality is God is always at work. And I think we see that in the book of Esther, that even in the worst of times when it seemed like all hope was lost, God was still at work. The providence of God still at work in the background, beyond maybe what they could see or understand. And I think we have to remind ourselves of that. And for me, that was such a great reminder and challenge and encouragement from the study and from the series. And I hope we all take that away and we look for moments and opportunities to step up, trusting that God is at work. So, okay, final question.
Mm-hmm.
As a worship leader, I don't know why you're laughing. If you were going to write a song about anybody in the book of Esther, who would you write the song about?
Well, for one, I don't write very many songs, but I am a Southern guy.
Yeah, of course.
Country music is pretty popular in the South, so you got to pick a
Indeed.
kind of
We
a
share
chaotic character, right?
That's right. That's right.
I think you got to go with King Xerxes. I mean, how many times
Yeah, okay.
is he making decisions just on a whim, which is like
It's true.
the perfect country song, right?
Plus Xerxes is really fun to say.
That's right.
It rhymes with nothing. way to pick a guy that name rhymes with nothing.
You don't have to rhyme it if you don't end a phrase with Xerxes. You can just bring him
Put
up,
it in the middle.
Yeah,
That's
just
good
put it in the
country-
middle.
Good country songs don't rhyme anyway. Everybody knows that.
He's drunk a lot.
That feels like a country song. There's love, and then there's not love, and there's love again.
I mean, he's got a lot of power,
There you go.
So
Okay, there you go. You
I'm
heard
sure
it.
that
You heard it.
would be
Next
fun.
hit song.
King Xerxes.
King Xerxes. Well,
The
this
X-Man.
That's great. This has been fun.
Yeah.
I think the series was great. If you haven't caught those messages, go back and listen and watch. They're all there available.
On the same channel.
And they're on the
They're
YouTube.
right here.
They're
Right
right
here
here
on
on the YouTube channel. They're also on the website. Go back and watch episode 20. You can see Landon there, the first time around.
If I'm not mistaken, I was wearing a Rams shirt last time. So
Oh, look at you. So,
don't wear
hopefully-
sports memorabilia
don't wear
every day.
Every day, but
But
most days.
enough that the 2 times I've been on here, I've had it. So
There you go.
there you go.
So, again, Jackson's away, so here we are, 2 bald guys today just to play. But we wish Jackson well. He's got a new baby, so he's learning what that
New
looks
dad.
like. New dad. So thanks for joining us today for Tangible Takeaways. Hey, if you've got some takeaways or really things that stood out to you that you found just really, really helpful, we'd love to see those and read those. So leave those in the comments here on
You can
the video.
step up and leave us a comment.
Oh, I like what
go.
you did right there.
Go.
I like
Let us
what
know
you did.
how it helped you.
There you go. Step up and type it out.
Type it down.
So anyway, hey, thanks for jumping in and joining us. We'll catch you next week and the next Tangible Takeaway, which will be 52. So thanks, guys. Have a great week.